Hello everyone, so today I want to talk about the newest addition to our 777 squatting game, Rogue. We're going to cover her abilities, her equipment requirements, and her current stand in the game. Alright, let's jump right in. Rogue is a Tetra manufactured Nikkei using sniper rifle with 6 ammo capacity, 2.33 second, and a charge time of 1 second. The charge time is pretty standard, however, her reload time is 0.33 second, longer than her closest rival, the Killer Wife. However, this will cause a little bit of issue if you do not have any sort of ammo addition used on her, because her skill 1 requires full charge for 8 times for her CDR to kick in. And this means that the easiest way for you to bypass this limitation of her additional recharge time is to at least equip her with a Wingman Cube, or you can get an overload gear on her with at least 1 plus ammo capacity. Her skill 1 also increased the max HP capacity, but it does not heal her teammate. Her skill 2 is called Coin Flip. This one is a little bit more complex than it needs to. Assuming you have a teammate positioned from left number 1, right number 5, she needs to be placed on position number 2 and 4. And in battles, if you take a look right here, she will be positioned on the back row on the battlefield, which is number 2 and number 4. And when you place her in those positions, she will buff her teammate either on position 1 or 3 or position 3 or 5. So her left and right teammates. And they'll be buffed by attack damage of 6.65%. This is actually a pretty decent buff. It doesn't look too high, but remember that attack damage is separated from attack value. So it is not as diluted as attack percentage right now. And her second part of her skill 2 is called Shield Coin. This activates whenever she has charge attack for 30 times. This also affects her teammates on both her left and right side. It decreases the amount of damage they take from 15.2% throughout the entire battle. This will become very useful if a raid boss has a mechanic that focuses on the highest damage dealers or highest attack value characters. The last part of her coin flip skill is called Double Sword. This activated after you enter the burst skill for 5 times. And ally that has shield coin status, which means it's going to be your ally on the left and right side. And what this does, it also increases your max HP 15% once. There is currently apparently a bug going on or a translation issues. This actually increases the max HP, also heals her teammate. However, the translation says without restoring HP. The biggest question for a lot of players right now is whether she's worth pulling for or not, right? Considering the fact that the 2nd anniversary is coming up, along with a possible another collab coming. We can take a look at the current race situation, and we also can take a look at your current position in the game to determine that. First of all, if all you're doing is trying to clear the map or trying to clear the normal maps 1 to, I can't remember the current latest storylines, you just need to focus on getting either leader, or you can try to get the Killer Wife. Leader is our forever highest regard burst 1. I think the dev overtuned her a little bit when she's released, but it does not change the fact that she is still one of our top burst 1 characters. And at the same time, the Killer Wife is specialized in enhancing characters that has piercing capabilities. So she is actually very useful to be placed in the same team as Red Hood and Maxwell. Red Hood and Maxwell can be swapped out for other characters, but Tia, Naga, Red Hood, and the Killer Wife will be your stable for either clearing the main storyline or also doing raids. Okay, that is the 2 most prominent team to the burst one character to clear the current content. When you're doing raids, you're typically going to have a third team. A third team right now, it is going to be Bunny's team. It is Blanc and Noor. And what typically we use before this is volume. But to be completely honest with you, volume is not that great of a burst one character. We use volume only because she has a cooldown reduction of 3.17 seconds. That is pretty much it. Okay, that's the only reason why most of us uses her. Other than that, most of the time, you just kind of swap around and between this team, the Scarlet Black Shadow, and the Red Hood team. Occasionally, you want to throw in Dorothy as burst 1, but she is not a very stable burst 1 character as well. It really depends on the challenge that you're going to face. Because of this, the addition of Rogue is very, very, very welcome for anyone that want to use her or want to perform in raids, due to the fact that Rogue is a burst 1 skill cooldown reduction of 7 seconds, similar to our favorite wife, the killer wife at the moment. Rogue is also great to have on the team because of the limitation of Blanc. Initially, her burst is limited to a 60-second rotation unless she has a 777 squad mate on her. Typically, that means that you also need to include Noor in Blanc's team, but with the addition of Rogue, Noor is no longer required to be positioned on the team. You want to keep Blanc as much as possible due to the fact that Blanc's burst is a 40% damage taken debuff to the enemy, and this is still one of the strongest available skills in the game right now. With Noor no longer be a requirement on the team, you actually now open up to a few possibilities that is also fairly useful. Well, first of all, you can still include Noor, right? Noor provides additional bullet to her teammate. She also provides additional attack value to her team as well. So she is still very valuable too when you're fighting enemies that's not exactly weak to fire type. However, if you're fighting against enemy that is weak to fire, which is one of the main reasons why you want to use this team, as Oscut and Modernia are very good sustained damage type characters that is good against enemy weak to fire, you can use Ray to buff the damage of both Oscut and Modernia. You can choose to use A2 or 2B as well because they are both fire type. You can also use this Helm to provide additional healing, or you can also use this Snow White if you want to have certain element covers in your raid. Lastly, Winter Owner Lamilla is also not a bad choice as well because Winter Soldier Lamilla also increases the max damage received by the enemy. Something you need to watch out when using the Rogue in her team composition is the fact that you have to watch out for your teammates' special capabilities. So remember that Rogue only provides her 6.65% attack damage buff to her character to her left and right. This also means that she either can place 2 or 4. But if you have Modernia as your teammate, Modernia always has to be team 5 because she does not want to be a burst character. This also means that you have to choose between either which one of your burst 3 is going to be the one receiving the 6.65 buff from your rogue, so determine which one. And at the same time, this also affects your auto burst rotation during a raid. Of course, you can manually process your raid rotation in the beginning of the raid to make things a little bit smoother later on. However, just remember that when you use rogue, you have to choose between which 2 of your burst 3 characters are going to get her buff. The Blanc and Noir combination, they're actually not too picky about teammates. So overall, it really depends on who you're trying to fight and who the raid boss is, right? For example, in a certain raid, if the raid boss is weak against fire, you can swap out Noir and you can also add Ray as a possible assist. If the enemy is weak against electric, you can swap out those three and you can include Annie's, Scarlet, and Ein into your team for electric damage. Overall, Blanc and Rogue is actually not very picky on their teammate. As long as you are a somewhat sustained damage type and does not require very specific other character to work together for their kit, you can generally just have Blanc and Rogue, or you can have Rogue as an additional buffer, and you can just pick 2 element type or 2 damage characters and put them on your team for maximum effect. And while you can use character from other squad that is more specialized to be supported. For example, D Killer Wife has a very similar buff to Rogue. Actually, in fact, Rogue does a better job at supporting non-sniper characters than D Killer Wife in a lot of cases, especially on bosses that doesn't have a breakable part or doesn't often have a breakable parts. And on the same time, Crown and Leader are mostly tied together. In most bosses, a lot of times that you can possibly change out Leader with Dorothy, but that is some of the niche uses on their team compositions. But overall, Rogue and Blanc are very, very flexible team leaders that can accept a lot of members onto their damage rotations. Lastly, let's talk about her skill levels and her overload gear and cubes. In general, her skill level has very, very low growth, to be completely honest with you. Her skill 1 is a must to increase due to the cool spread down potentials. I would recommend pumping it up to level 7 at first for her most universal teams. And her skill 2, while it is a attack damage buff, the current increased HP is really not that useful among all the other characters besides 2B. I suspect that we are going to see another main burst 3 character that is going to base off of max HP, but I cannot guarantee that right now. So due to that, I would say level 6 is good enough. Level 4 or 5, in fact, I will actually just cut it. Singles to a burst. Initially, the growth potential for her skill is also not that high for her burst as well, because let's be honest, pure attack bonus is not very useful nowadays in the game due to the fact that first of all, she's a support type. So the damage bonus given from her is already taking a certain beating. Second of all, attack plus 11% is very, very limited. Characters like Asuka, their characters like Scarlet, they already give themselves 80 to 100% self-damage buff. 11.54% at skill 6 and 12.42% at skill 7 is a pretty small drop in the bucket in terms of overall damage growth. So this skill, while still decent, it is not a very high priority to level up in the grand scheme of your team. Honestly, if you're just first started in the game, I will recommend you to get her skill 1 to level 7, skill 2 to level 4, and skill 3 to level 4. And afterwards, I would say get her skill to level 9, and maybe 7 if you want to spend the resources. And ultimately, once you are done with everything else, you can get her passive skill 1 to level 10. I honestly don't think skill 2 and skill 3 is that great of an investment, But if you really must try to max her out, I think skill 2 and skill 3 at level 9 is the maximum you should ever go for due to the possible damage growth. Just doesn't worth it. Alright, let's talk about equipment. As I previously mentioned, she is a character that only has 6 ammo capacity. However, her skill requires her to shoot 8 times continuously, right? This means that one of her gear has to be overloaded, and at the same time, you just need to get at least one overload stats that has more than 40% to get. Actually, 30% will actually do to get more than 8 bullets total at start for her to start applying your cooldowns. Other than that, she really doesn't need overload on her gears unless we have a future burst 3 character that be buffed based off of her max HP. Then at that point, we will need to upgrade all her overload gear to overload status because the gear's stats will directly increase the maximum HP she can buff. Cube wise, she really doesn't need anything special. You can give her resilience cube, you can give her wingman cube. Either way, it doesn't matter. Bastion cube works too, but honestly it's kind of a waste to place it on her, so most of the time a wingman cube on her will be more than enough. As for other overload lines, honestly, they all do very minimal amount of stuff that help her out. Attack value doesn't really do anything because the attack buff from her skill is not tied to the increase from overload gears. And at the same time, elemental damage really doesn't matter that much because she doesn't really do that much damage in the first place. And lastly, charge speed buff, while does help, it helps very little due to the fact that her charge speed is only 1 second. So if you spend a crap ton of money, a crap ton of stones, and get all your charge speed to, let's say, 6% each row, that will only maximum decreases the charge time by roughly 0.25 seconds. In the grand scheme of things, that really doesn't matter that much. So I will strongly recommend you to save your stones and roll for something else on the other characters. So should you pull for Rogue? I think this really depends on your current situation in game. For example, if you are just trying to clear the levels and you do not currently own leader or do not have the killer wife, I would very strongly suggest you to go and pull Rogue because she is one of the best burst 1 character with a 7-second cooldown reductions. If you are doing Union Raid and you only have leader and rogue, leader and the killer wife, and does not have Dorothy, I will also strongly suggest you to go and pull Rogue as well because Rogue is a must-have 3rd character for CDR if you do not have Dorothy. Alternatively, if you are looking to do solo raids, and I would definitely pull for Rogue as well because what's left of the burst 1 cooldown reduction is volume, which honestly isn't that good in today's standard. You have Sakura, which is on the 40-second cooldown reduction, which really completely kills her kit, to be honest with you. And lastly, you are going to have Helm, Summer Helm, which is a very conditional buffer. And you are going to have Dola, in which her kit is getting a little bit outdated in terms of total damage buff. So Rogue, in my opinion, she is a very, very great character that provides consistent buff to her team, that doesn't have much condition you need to meet, doesn't have much timing that you also need to meet. Her skill is not based off of a rotational cooldown, unlike, for example, Marie's or, for example, Yoha's. She is just a very, very, very consistent buffer that you can always trust and depend on. So in conclusion, I think if you have the capabilities, I would definitely pull for a copy of Rogue if possible. Alright, that would be it for my review for Rogue for the time being. If you have any more questions, let me know, and I'll see you next time. Bye.